The suffocating humidity of an Austin, Texas summer night clung to the air, a heavy, damp shroud pressing down on the bustling downtown streets. It was well past midnight, and the atmosphere, thick with the scent of barbecue from a distant smokehouse and the faint, earthy smell of the Colorado River, felt tense and still. Neon signs from the bars on 6th Street cast a vibrant, restless glow on the pavement, creating islands of garish light in the deep urban shadows. Officer Kate Riley, in her mid-20s, with fiery red hair pulled back in a tight, regulation braid under her police cap, felt a bead of sweat trickle down her temple. She was built lean, moving with a sharp, focused energy that hinted at an unwavering discipline. The city's lively, often chaotic, nightlife didn't faze her. Beside her, in the passenger seat of the K9 cruiser, Zeus, her partner, let out a low, rumbling sigh. He was a striking sable German shepherd, his intelligent eyes ever watchful, a perfectly calibrated instrument of law and order. They were a team, a common sight patrolling the districts that blended gleaming high-rises with historic music venues. A few blocks away, a pedicab, one of the last of the night, pedaled along, its driver weaving tales of local legends to a couple of tourists. It was, for Austin, a typical, sweltering summer night. Then, the night was fractured by the roar of a predator. Not an animal, but the high-pitched scream of a high-performance engine pushed to its absolute limit. A crimson Ferrari convertible tore around the corner of Congress Avenue, its tires squealing in protest against the asphalt. The driver, fueled by arrogance or tequila, swerved violently to miss a parked food truck and shot directly into the path of an oncoming city bus. The bus's air brakes hissed and shrieked. Passengers yelled as the driver wrenched the wheel, the massive vehicle lurching to a stop mere inches from the sports car. The Ferrari, undeterred, just gunned its engine again, the sound echoing like a gunshot between the glass and steel buildings, and sped off. Kate had seen it all. Her hands were already in motion. "All right, partner," she said, her voice calm. She hit the switch, and the cruiser's lights instantly bathed the street in strobing flashes of red and blue. The siren wailed, a sharp, necessary slash through the night's rhythm. The Ferrari, its escape route blocked by Kate's expert maneuver into the center of the street, finally slammed on its brakes, fishtailing slightly before coming to a stop. Kate left Zeus in the car, the K9 unit's engine and air conditioning running at full blast for his safety. She approached the driver's side of the Ferrari, her hand resting casually on her hip near her service weapon. The driver, a young man in his early 20s, was struggling to climb out of the low-slung car. He wore a designer shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, revealing a gaudy gold chain, and his dark hair was a carefully styled mess. This was Ethan Vance, a face Kate recognized from departmental bulletins but had never encountered. He was the sole heir of the city's most formidable and untouchable real estate magnate. As he finally stumbled out, a wave of expensive tequila fumes washed over him, strong enough to make Kate's eyes water. He leaned against the car for balance, a petulant sneer twisting his handsome face. "Do you have any idea," Ethan slurred, pointing an unsteady finger at her, "what this car is worth? You probably just scratched the paint, you cop." Kate's expression remained neutral. "Sir, I just saw you nearly cause a catastrophic accident with a city bus. May I see your license and registration, please?" Ethan scoffed, a wet, dismissive sound. "I don't need a license," he mumbled. He pulled out a slim, rose gold phone. He fumbled with the screen before pressing it to his ear. "This is absurd." Kate waited, her patience a practiced skill. She had seen this act before. The entitlement, the belief that laws were for little people. "Dad," Ethan whined into the phone, his tone shifting jarringly from arrogant to infantile. "Yeah, it's me. Listen, some K9 cop is giving me a hard time downtown. Can you, just handle it?" He snapped the phone shut and glared at her, his eyes glassy. "He'll handle it. You're finished." "Sir, I am not finished," Kate said, her voice firm, slicing through his drunken fog. "I need you to step away from the vehicle and onto the sidewalk. I'm going to conduct a field sobriety test." Ethan looked genuinely bewildered, as if she had just asked him to levitate. "A test? You can't test me." But he complied, stumbling as he tried to walk a straight line. Kate administered the test with methodical precision. The horizontal gaze nystagmus, the walk and turn, the one-leg stand. Ethan failed every single part spectacularly, almost toppling over twice. "This is idiotic," he spat. "These loafers aren't for walking." Kate finished her notes. "Sir," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion but professional duty, "based on my observations and your performance on these tests, I am placing you under arrest for driving while intoxicated." She put away her notepad and unclipped her handcuffs. The metallic click of the cuffs opening seemed to echo in the humid air. For the first time, a flicker of real panic flashed across Ethan's face. He looked from the cuffs to her face. You can't be serious. Do you know who I am?" It was then that the headlights washed over them. They were so bright they bleached the color from the scene, turning the asphalt white and Kate's blue uniform black. A new vehicle, a mirror black SUV, had glided silently onto the street from the opposite direction, boxing in the Cruiser and the Ferrari completely. Its engine was a low, almost inaudible rumble. The street, which had been empty moments before, now felt like a trap. The SUV's doors opened in perfect unison. 4 men emerged. They were not street thugs. They were large, dressed in immaculate dark suits, their movements economical and precise. The driver, a mountain of a man with a shaved head, walked directly toward Ethan. The other 3 fanned out, their target immediately clear: Kate. Kate's hand instinctively went to her weapon, but she didn't draw. "Stay back," she commanded, her police voice ringing out. "This is an active arrest scene." The men didn't even slow down. It happened faster than she could have anticipated. The first man, one who looked like a former MMA fighter with cauliflower ears, didn't try to talk. He simply lunged, not at her, but at her side. He grabbed her service weapon, holster and all, and with a single, brutally efficient twist, ripped the entire assembly from her duty belt. The specialized plastic and leather snapped, the sound sharp in the night. Kate cried out, more in shock than pain, as the second man, thinner but with the quick, wiry movements of a viper, grabbed her radio hand and slammed her arm against the side of the Ferrari. Her radio clattered to the pavement. The third man, the largest of the group, stepped behind her. He grabbed her other arm, wrenched it behind her back, and pinned it there with a grip that felt like a steel vise. He locked his other arm around her throat, not choking her, but controlling her completely. Kate was trapped, her arms pinned, her body held immobile by sheer, overwhelming force. She was a trained officer, strong and capable, but this was a professional takedown. She was utterly helpless. Ethan Vance watched, his panic replaced by a slow, reptilian smile. He sauntered over until he was standing directly in front of the immobilized officer, so close she could smell the tequila on his breath. He looked at the man holding her. "Hold her tight, Frank," he slurred. "I want her to watch." He turned his gaze to the K9 Cruiser, where Zeus, sensing his handler's distress, had begun to bark, a deep, frantic, and furious sound from behind the reinforced glass. "You brought your little doggy," Ethan said, his voice laced with a cruel, gleeful venom. "I hate dogs." He nodded to the 2 men who had disarmed her. "Show him." Kate's eyes widened in pure terror. No, don't you touch my dog. He's a police officer. No." Her screams were muffled as the man holding her tightened his grip. The former fighter and the wiry man walked to the Cruiser. They found the K9 deployment handle on the car. With a hiss, the rear door popped open. Zeus, a 90-pound mass of muscle and training, exploded from the car, launching himself at the men he perceived as a threat to his handler. He was trained for this. But the men were ready. They were wearing steel-toed boots. As Zeus lunged, the first man kicked him, not with a frantic punt, but with a calculated, full-force kick aimed directly at his ribs. The impact sent the dog yelping, tumbling sideways. Before Zeus could even regain his footing, the second man stepped in and delivered another kick. This one connected with a sickening, wet thud that Kate felt in her own chest. They didn't stop. They began to kick him systematically, the sound of the heavy boots hitting the shepherd's body over and over. "Zeus!" Kate shrieked, fighting uselessly against the arm holding her. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the sweat. "Stop. Please, you're killing him. Stop." Ethan just watched, his smile widening. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. "You hear that?" he whispered as another pained yelp was cut short. "That's the sound of you learning your place." Kate was forced to watch, her eyes wide with horror as her partner, her friend, was beaten into silence on the dark streets of Austin. Jack Corrigan was trying to forget. He walked the neon-lit streets of Austin to quiet the noise in his head, the lingering echo of firefights and barked orders from half a world away. He was a man in his mid-30s, built with the lean, dense muscle of a predator, not the bulk of a bodybuilder. His movements, even in civilian jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, were economical and silent. He was on leave, a Navy SEAL attempting to decompress, which for him meant walking until his body ached just a little less than his mind. He wore a worn baseball cap pulled low, his features obscured, his eyes constantly scanning, a habit he couldn't turn off. The humid air, The scent of barbecue, it was all supposed to be grounding. He turned a corner, heading back toward his nondescript hotel, when the sound cut through the night, bypassing his ears and hitting his nervous system directly. It wasn't the engine roar, which he'd heard earlier. It was a woman's scream, not an "I'm startled" scream. It was a raw, terrified, hopeless shriek. "No, please, you're killing him." Jack did not run toward the sound. He stopped perfectly still. He let the city's ambient noise fade and listened. The scream was followed by a sickening, repetitive thud. A man's taunting, slurred voice, and beneath it all, the most triggering sound, the high-pitched, agonizing yelp of a dog in pain. Jack Corrigan's mission to decompress was officially over. He didn't move toward the lights of the street. He moved toward the darkness. He melted into the mouth of a narrow, brick-lined alley, a sliver of shadow between a boutique and a high-end restaurant. He flowed through it, his feet making no sound on the cracked pavement. He emerged behind a large, decorative planter, his entire profile broken up by the shadows. He had a perfect view of the scene 20 yards away. His assessment took less than 3 seconds. One female officer immobilized, held from behind by a very large man, target 3. 2 men, target 1, target 2, systematically kicking a K9 on the ground. One drunk civilian, the principal, clearly the cause, watching with a smile. One more man, target 4, the driver, leaning against the black SUV, detached, serving as lookout. 4 henchmen, 1 hostage, 1 victim. Jack's objective formed instantly: rescue the officer. Save the K9. Incapacitate all threats. And the most important rule: disappear. This was not war. It was surgery. He took a slow breath, letting the adrenaline sharpen his focus into a cold, diamond-hard point. He began to move. He didn't exit the shadows. He used them, moving from the planter to the rear of the SUV, completely unseen. The driver, the lookout, was texting, his gaze flicking lazily toward the commotion. He was the first obstacle. Jack moved. The driver heard nothing. He just felt a hand cup his chin and a rigid set of knuckles strike his temple. The thud was barely audible. The driver crumpled, unconscious before he hit the ground. Target 4 neutralized. Jack took the man's sidearm, checked the chamber, and tucked it into the back of his own waistband, not as a weapon, but as a precaution. Now for the cluster. The remaining 3 were focused entirely on their victims. Kate was still screaming, her voice growing hoarse. "Stop! Zeus!" The 2 men kicking the shepherd were laughing. The first one, a broad-shouldered man in a tight black suit, reared back for another kick. He never landed it. Jack, emerging from the shadow of the SUV, was on him. He didn't punch. He grabbed the man's extended right wrist with his left hand, and his right hand grabbed the elbow. He twisted. It was a simple, brutal lesson in physics. The sound of the man's wrist and elbow joint popping was loud and wet. The man screamed, a high-pitched sound that was nothing like Kate's, and clutched his now useless arm. Target 1 neutralized. The second man, thinner and faster, turned in surprise. He was quick, but Jack was already inside his guard, moving on a different level of time. The man saw a blur and then felt a rigid, 5-fingered strike just below his rib cage, followed by a vicious elbow to the side of his head. He gasped, all the air forced from his lungs, and dropped to his knees, his eyes rolling back. Target 2 neutralized. 2 seconds had passed. 2 men down. Ethan Vance's drunken smile vanished, replaced by a look of profound, terrified confusion. What? Who? The man holding Kate, the one Ethan called Frank, was a professional. He reacted instantly. He tightened his grip on Kate, using her as a human shield, his other hand fumbling inside his jacket for a weapon. "Stay back!" he roared. Jack didn't stay back, but he also didn't charge. He held his hands up, palms open, a universal sign of peace. "Let her go," Jack said, his voice a low, calm rumble. "We can just talk." Frank hesitated, confused by the man's calm. Jack took one slow step forward. "You don't want this. I'll kill her," Frank shouted, his arm tightening on Kate's throat. Kate gasped, her airway closing. Jack saw the man's eyes flick to the side, looking at Ethan. He wasn't in charge. He was waiting for orders. That was the opening. Jack didn't attack Frank. He moved past him toward Kate. As he passed, his hand, moving with blinding speed, shot out and snatched the handcuff still dangling from Kate's broken belt. He didn't stop. He pivoted behind Frank, grabbed the chain between the cuffs, and with the full force of his body weight, yanked it backward around Frank's thick throat. Frank's gun was forgotten. His hold on Kate vanished. Both of his hands flew to his own neck, clawing at the steel chain that was instantly embedded in his flesh. Jack held the choke, his expression cold and focused, lifting the massive man onto his toes. Frank made a sound like a drowning bull, his face turning a dark plum color. Jack held it for 3 seconds until the man's body went limp and then let him fall in a heap, unconscious. Target 3 neutralized. The entire engagement, from the first man to the last, had taken less than 12 seconds. The downtown street was suddenly, shockingly silent, broken only by the sound of Kate's ragged gasps and the faint, pained whimpering of the dog. Ethan Vance was paralyzed, his mouth open, his rose gold phone still clutched in his hand. He stared at the 4 unmoving bodies of his father's best men, then at Jack, who stood calmly in the center of the carnage. Jack wasn't even breathing heavily. He looked at Ethan, his eyes in the shadow of his cap as cold as the bottom of the ocean. Ethan let out a small squeak and, in a final act of cowardice, threw up on his own expensive shoes. Jack ignored him. He stripped the tucked-in weapon from his waistband, laid it gently on the hood of the SUV, and turned to the woman who was now free. Kate had fallen to her knees beside her partner. Zeus. Oh no. Oh, partner, I'm here. I'm so sorry. She was sobbing, her hands hovering over the dog's bruised and still body, afraid to touch him. Jack walked over, kneeling on the other side of the dog. He put 2 fingers to Zeus's neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, thready, but there. He ran his hands expertly over the dog's ribs, his touch surprisingly gentle. Kate looked up, finally seeing her rescuer. His face was calm, his eyes intense, and she realized with a jolt that she felt absolutely no fear of him. He was the most dangerous thing she had ever seen, and he had just saved her. Jack met her gaze. His voice was low, cutting through her panic. "Officer," he said, "are you injured?" Jack's voice cut through the fog of Kate's horror. "Officer, where is the nearest K-9 approved emergency vet?" It wasn't a question. It was a command that reset her brain. She fumbled for her radio, her hand finding the empty, broken clip on her belt. The panic rose again. "My radio, phone," Jack said. It was a one-word order. She pulled out her personal phone, her thumbprint failing twice because of the blood before the screen unlocked. She speed dialed the number she knew by heart. Her voice was a choked, unrecognizable thing. "This is Officer Riley, badge 4118. I have an officer down. My K-9 Zeus, he needs immediate." She relayed the address of the clinic a few miles away. Jack was already moving. He scooped Zeus's limp, 90-pound body into his arms as if he weighed nothing. The dog let out a single, thin whimper of pain. "My cruiser," she whispered. "The keys." "Get in the passenger seat," Jack said, already moving toward her car. He didn't have time to be a ghost. He laid Zeus gently but quickly across the back seat, the specialized K-9 insert protecting him. Kate stumbled into the passenger side, her body moving on autopilot. Jack slid into the driver's seat of her police cruiser, a violation of a dozen protocols, and hit the lights. He didn't use the siren. He didn't need to. He drove through the empty streets of Austin with a terrifying, controlled speed, navigating the one-way streets as if he had lived there his entire life, getting them to the clinic in under 4 minutes. The suspects, the Ferrari, and the black SUV were left behind, a problem for the backup that was surely screaming toward their location. They burst through the glass doors of the Austin Emergency Vet Clinic, a place that smelled of antiseptic, fear, and bleach. The waiting room was painfully bright, a sterile white and blue box designed to be cleaned easily. A young woman with bright green hair and scrubs covered in cartoon armadillos looked up from the front desk. This was Maria, the night shift lead technician. Her perpetually tired eyes widened when she saw the K-9 uniform, the blood, and the massive, unmoving dog in the man's arms. "Gurney!" she yelled, hitting a button on her console. "K-9 officer down." Instantly, a team in matching scrubs swarmed from the back with a wheeled gurney. Jack gently laid Zeus on it, his hands now smeared with the dog's blood. "What happened?" Maria asked, her voice all business as they wheeled Zeus through a set of swinging metal doors. "He was attacked," Kate said, her voice trembling. "They kicked him multiple times. Ribs, I think his ribs." "Officer," Maria said, stopping her, her voice softer but firm. She held out a clipboard. "I need you to fill this out. Handler's name, unit, pre-existing conditions, allergies. We need it for his file before we can operate." Kate took the clipboard. She stared at the first box. Handler name. Her hand, slick with blood, couldn't hold the pen. The letters on the page swam in her vision. The room tilted. I can't, she whispered, staring at her own shaking hands. I can't make it stop. Jack stepped forward. He took the clipboard from her unresisting fingers and the pen from the desk. He spoke to Maria, his voice low and steady, a calming anchor in the sterile chaos. Officer Kate Riley, badge 4118. K9 is Zeus, 4 years old, sable German Shepherd. No known allergies or pre-existing conditions. He is an active duty police dog. Maria looked at him, her gaze flicking from his blood-stained t-shirt to the calm authority in his eyes. And you are? A witness, Jack said, which was the simple, uncomplicated truth. He needs help. Whatever deposit you require, I'll cover it. He pulled a simple, worn black wallet from his back pocket and produced a plain, unflashy credit card. He wasn't asking, he was stating a fact. Maria, accustomed to panicked owners and frantic energy, was struck by his absolute control. She nodded once, took the card, and ran it. You can wait here. The doctor will be out as soon as she has an assessment. And with that, they were left alone. Kate collapsed into one of the hard, molded plastic chairs. The adrenaline that had held her together was gone, leaving a black, sucking vacuum of shock, guilt, and icy fear. She replayed the scene. The headlights, the boot, the sound Zeus made. I should have shot them. I let him get taken. He was protecting me, and I let him. Jack did not sit next to her. He gave her space, taking a seat on the opposite side of the small, silent room. The only sounds were the aggressive hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the tick of a clock on the wall, each second an eternity. He was a silent sentinel, a shadow against the bright white wall. He wasn't awkward. He wasn't fidgeting. He was just present. Kate began to shake, a deep, uncontrollable tremor starting in her hands and spreading to her whole body. It was the physical shock setting in. She wrapped her arms around herself, but it didn't help. Jack watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He saw a soldier in the agonizing aftermath, the quiet part after the explosion. He stood up. Kate flinched, a small, scared movement, thinking he was leaving her. He didn't. He walked past her toward a battered vending machine in the corner. She heard the clunk of coins, the whir of a cheap motor. The swinging doors opened, and a new woman appeared. This was Dr. Anna Shapiro, a veterinarian in her 50s with the kind, exhausted eyes of a woman who had seen too many emergencies and not enough sleep. Her scrubs were stained. Officer Riley? She asked, her voice gentle. Kate leapt to her feet, the world narrowing to this one woman. Is he okay? Please, is he? Dr. Shapiro's expression was grave. She didn't sugarcoat it. Officer, Zeus is in critical condition. We've done x-rays. He has 3 broken ribs, and 1 has punctured a lung. He is bleeding internally. Kate's hand flew to her mouth. Oh no. I'll be blunt, the doctor continued. He needs emergency surgery right now to repair the lung and stop the bleeding. Without it, he will not make it through the next hour. Kate's legs buckled, and she fell back into the chair. What are his chances? She whispered, a question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Dr. Shapiro sighed. Honestly, 50-50. He's strong. He's a K9, which is in his favor, but the damage is severe. I need your consent to operate. Yes, Kate choked out, the word tearing from her throat. Yes, whatever it takes. Please save him. The doctor nodded. We'll do everything we can. She turned and disappeared back through the doors. The dam broke. The 50-50 chance, the if of it all, shattered her remaining control. Kate put her bloody hands to her face and began to sob. Not the loud screams from the street, but the silent, racking, body-shaking sobs of true and profound despair. She was drowning in the fluorescent light. A moment later, Jack was standing in front of her. He was holding 2 steaming styrofoam cups. He had gotten coffee from the vending machine. It smelled burnt and terrible. He didn't say, "It'll be okay." He didn't pat her on the back. He didn't hug her. He just stood there holding the coffee until she finally, shakily, lowered her hands. He held 1 cup out to her. She was shaking so violently she could barely lift her arm. As she reached for it, her trembling fingers brushed against his. His hand was rock steady, scarred, and radiated a warmth that cut through the icy shock. The brief contact was like an anchor, the first solid thing she had felt since this started. She took the cup. He sat down, not across from her this time, but in the chair right next to her. He took a sip of his own coffee and didn't even wince at the taste. He stared at the blank, wall-mounted TV. He's a K9, he said, his voice quiet, almost conversational. Kate looked at him, her vision blurry with tears. What? He's not a pet, Jack clarified, his gaze still on the TV. He's a warrior. Kate just stared at him, confused. They're trained for this, Jack continued as if stating a simple, unchangeable fact. They are trained to fight, to endure, and to survive. This is his fight. You just have to let him do his job. It was the strangest, most practical, and most comforting thing anyone could have possibly said. He wasn't offering sympathy. He was offering respect. He was reframing it. Zeus wasn't just a victim. He was a soldier in triage. Kate took a shaky sip of the awful coffee. It burned her throat, and for the first time in an hour, her hands shook just a little bit less. She nodded, more to herself than to him. A warrior, she repeated, her voice a raw whisper. Yeah, he is. Kate never made it home. After Jack left the clinic, just as her own backup, a shaken patrolman named Riley, arrived, she was driven to the precinct. The sun was beginning to stain the eastern sky a pale, sickly yellow, filtering through the humid haze. She spent the next 3 hours in a small, windowless debriefing room. Now, just after 7:00 a.m., she sat at her own desk in the squad room, which hummed with the early morning shift change. The air smelled of burnt coffee, industrial cleaner, and the ozone from old computers. Her uniform was stiff with dried blood, her own and Zeus's. Her body ached, a symphony of sympathetic pain, and her hands still trembled as she tried to type her official report. Each keystroke was an agony, forcing her to relive the moment the boots connected, the sound of the ribs snapping, her own useless screams. Her report was meticulous, detailing every slurred word from Ethan, every action taken by the men, every second of the assault. She named Ethan Vance as the principal and noted his clear, taunting words. She typed until her fingers were numb. Riley, my office. The voice belonged to Captain Dave Ramsey, a man in his early 50s who wore his 25 years on the force like a heavy coat. Ramsey was a good cop with a weathered, tired face and eyes that had seen too much but missed nothing. He respected Kate. He had personally approved her for the K-9 program. Kate stood, her body protesting, and walked into his glass-walled office, report in hand. He gestured for her to sit. I just got off the phone with the hospital, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. Your partner is out of surgery. Dr. Shapiro said it was touch and go, but he's stable. The next 12 hours are critical. A single hot tear of relief escaped and tracked a clean path through the grime on Kate's cheek. She just nodded, unable to speak. Good, Ramsey said, looking at the report, not at her. Now, this. He scanned the first page. His face was neutral. He scanned the second page, and his jaw tightened. He stopped, his gaze fixed on a single typed name, Ethan Vance. He looked up at Kate, his expression no longer just supportive, but deeply, profoundly worried. Kate, he said, his voice dropping. Are you 100% certain on this name? Yes, sir, she said, her voice firm. He introduced himself. He called his father on the phone. Ramsey leaned back in his chair, the old leather groaning. He rubbed his eyes. His father. Of course he did. He tossed the report onto his desk. Well, it doesn't matter. Ethan Vance was bailed out 3 hours ago. Kate's head snapped up. What? How? I hadn't even finished the report. His lawyer was at the booking station before your backup even called it in, Ramsey said flatly. This is Charles Vance we're talking about, Kate, not some street-level boss. This family is Austin. They own half the new high-rises, half the tech development, and some say half the city council. People who cross them have a tendency to disappear, or worse. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. Your report is perfect. Your actions were by the book, but you need to understand what you just stepped on. This isn't a hornet's nest, this is a dragon's lair. He almost killed a police officer, sir, Kate whispered, her fury a cold, hard stone in her stomach. He almost killed Zeus. I know, Ramsey said, his voice grim. And they will pay for that, but not in the way you think. They'll pay a fine. They'll make a donation. They'll get a slap on the wrist. But you, he stood up, you go home, get some sleep. I'm putting you on administrative leave for the next 72 hours. Standard procedure after an officer-involved incident. Sir, I'm fine. That wasn't a request, Riley, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Go. And watch your back. Seriously. While Kate was in Ramsey's office, Jack Corrigan was in a sterile hotel room across town. He had showered, the blood and grime of the street washing away, but he was not resting. His laptop, A sleek, unmarked, and highly encrypted piece of hardware sat on the cheap hotel desk. He was a ghost, and he had been seen. He had left 4 men neutralized on a city street. He needed to know the enemy. He ran the name he'd heard the drunk kid whine, Vance. He wasn't using Google. He was using secure, backchannel resources, skills honed by years of intelligence gathering in hostile territories. The information that populated his screen in moments was far more detailed than Captain Ramsey's warning. Charles Vance, head of the Vance Development Empire, a front for one of the most powerful organized crime syndicates in the state. The file was thick: smuggling, extortion, labor racketeering, and a long list of missing rivals. The 4 men from the street were professionals, and the son, Ethan Vance, was listed with a string of dismissed charges: reckless endangerment, assault, possession. A spoiled, volatile, and untouchable asset. Jack shut the laptop. This was bad. The officer, Riley, was tough, but she was a cop. She played by rules. The Vance family did not. He had seen this scenario play out a dozen times in foreign countries. The local, honest official who gets too close and is silenced. He had just dropped her in the middle of a war she was not equipped to fight. Kate walked out of the precinct, the bright morning sun feeling like an assault. She was exhausted, angry, and now officially on leave. She felt utterly alone. Her personal car, a simple, practical sedan, was parked in the far corner of the police lot. As she approached, a man stepped out from behind a concrete pillar as if he had been waiting for her. He was not a cop. He was in his late 30s, wearing an impeccably tailored silver-gray suit that must have cost more than her car, despite the already stifling humidity. His dark hair was perfect, his smile bright and disarming. He held a slim leather briefcase. This was Marcus Thorne, the Vance family's chief counsel. "Officer Riley?" he asked, his voice smooth as silk. "A moment of your time?" "I'm off duty," Kate said, her hand on her car door. "My apologies," Thorne said, his smile never wavering. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I represent the Vance family. And first, I want to say that my client, Ethan, is deeply, deeply sorry for the misunderstanding last night. He's just a young man. He was emotional, you understand?" Kate's hand tightened on the handle. "A misunderstanding? He assaulted a police K9. Thorne's smile tightened just a fraction. "An unfortunate incident, which is why the Vance family, as longtime supporters of Austin law enforcement, would like to make a substantial 5-figure donation to the city's K9 unit to ensure all your brave officers and their partners have the very best equipment." He paused, letting the offer hang in the air. "We only need one small thing, a clarification. Your report. It's our understanding from several witnesses that your dog became agitated, that it attacked my client's vehicle first, that he and his security were simply defending themselves. A tragic accident." Kate stared at him. The sheer audacity of it, the casual, confident corruption. She felt the blood drain from her face, replaced by a cold, sharp rage. "Are you attempting to bribe a police officer, Mr. Thorne?" The question was flat, dead. Marcus Thorne's smile evaporated. It didn't fade, it vanished as if a switch had been thrown. His face, without the smile, was cold, reptilian. He straightened his tie. "That's a very accusatory term, officer. I was offering clarification, but I see you're not in a mood to be reasonable." He took a small step closer, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "Such a shame. This city can be a very dangerous place, Officer Riley, especially for someone who is distracted. Grieving, perhaps." He looked past her toward the street. "I do hope you have good brakes on this vehicle. The streets in Austin, they get very slippery when it rains." He didn't wait for a reply. He gave her a small, tight nod, turned, and walked to a pristine black sedan parked in a fire lane. He slid in and glided silently out of the lot, leaving Kate standing alone in the oppressive heat. The threat hung in the air, heavier and more suffocating than the humidity itself. Kate drove home in a daze, the lawyer's threat echoing in the stuffy 8 a.m. air. The 72-hour administrative leave felt less like a support measure and more like an isolation tactic. They had taken her badge, her gun, and her partner. She was a civilian, sitting exposed in a car she now saw as a potential trap. She checked her rearview mirror on every block, convinced the black sedan was following her. Her apartment, a simple ground-floor unit in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, suddenly felt like a death trap. As she fumbled with her keys, the flimsy lock on her front door seemed laughably inadequate. She stepped inside, double-locked the knob, and slid the pathetic chain-link latch across. It wouldn't stop anyone, let alone the kind of men who worked for Charles Vance. She was pacing the small living room, every floorboard creaked from the apartment above, making her jump, when her phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from an unknown number. Her heart leapt, thinking it was a new threat. She read the message, "How's the warrior?" Her breath caught. There was only one person it could be. Her fingers trembled as she typed a reply, erasing it twice. "He's stable. Out of surgery, but in the critical phase." She stared at the message, wondering if she should add more. Before she could, the phone buzzed again. "I'm aware of the threat. Your apartment is a tactical vulnerability. I'm on my way." Kate stared at the words. Tactical vulnerability. It was the coldest, most accurate, and most terrifying description of her home she had ever heard. She typed, "You don't have to. I'm fine." The reply was instant. "No, you're not. I'm 10 minutes out." True to his word, exactly 10 minutes later, there was a quiet, firm knock on her door. Not the hesitant knock of a friend, not the aggressive rap of a threat, but something in between. Purposeful. She looked through the peephole. It was him. He was wearing the same dark t-shirt and jeans, but he had a canvas tool bag slung over one shoulder, and in his other hand, he held a small, sealed hardware package. She opened the door. "What's that?" she asked, her voice raspy. Jack Corrigan looked past her, his eyes scanning the hinges, the lock, the proximity of the window to the door. "This," he said, holding up the package, "is a grade 1 deadbolt. What you have," he motioned to her doorknob, "is a suggestion. May I come in?" He didn't wait for a reply, just moved past her, his presence seeming to fill the small apartment. He dropped the tool bag by the door. "You live on the ground floor. Your windows are single pane, and your lock can be bypassed with a credit card," he said, his voice a low monotone as he surveyed the room. "It's a nightmare. Where are your tools?" "In the kitchen closet," she stammered. He nodded and went to retrieve them. For the next hour, he worked. The silence was filled only with the whir of a power drill, the click of a ratchet, the scrape of the old lock being removed. Kate just sat at her small kitchen table, watching him. He worked with the same terrifying, economical precision he had used on the street. No wasted motion. He not only installed the new deadbolt, but he used a small kit from his own bag to reinforce the door jamb with a 3-inch steel plate. Then he moved to the windows, installing simple secondary locks that would prevent them from being slid open from the outside. "Thank you," she said, her voice small. "You didn't have to do this." He finished tightening a screw on the last window lock and stood up. "They won't try a subtle attack. Not after last night," he said, as if talking to himself. "They'll either try to scare you, like the lawyer, or they'll go for a hard entry. This just buys you time. You should not be here alone." He turned to her, and his gaze finally softened just a fraction. He looked at her hands, which were raw and red from where she had scrubbed Zeus's blood off them. "They've isolated you." It wasn't a question. Kate nodded, the wall she had kept up at the precinct finally starting to crumble. "He's all I have here," she whispered, the admission costing her. "My family's in Oregon. It's just been me and him since the academy." She traced a small, faint white scar on the back of her hand. "He gave me this when he was a 12-week-old puppy. Bit me right after I picked him out. Little monster." A sad smile touched her lips. "I knew he'd be a great cop." Jack stood in front of her, his own arms corded with muscle, now streaked with drywall dust. He instinctively rubbed a spot on his forearm, a long, puckered, silvery white scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. Kate's eyes were drawn to it. "What about you?" she asked, desperate to change the subject from her own pain. "Is that from your work?" Jack looked down at the scar as if seeing it for the first time. He was quiet for a long moment. He had been trained to lie, to dissemble, to create cover stories, but he looked at her, at the raw, honest pain in her eyes, and he found himself incapable of it. "Ramadi," he said, the word clipped and heavy. "Shrapnel from a bad call. A friend of mine, he didn't make it. This was just my reminder." It was the most he had told anyone in years. He had just created a bond, a shared vulnerability that was more intimate than any touch. They stood in the quiet of the reinforced apartment. Two warriors from different worlds, suddenly profoundly connected by the scars they carried. The moment was broken by the shrill ring of her phone on the counter. Kate's entire body went rigid. She stared at the phone, the caller ID flashing Austin Vet Clinic. This was it. This was the call. Her blood ran cold. It had been hours. They were calling to tell her he was gone. "I can't," she whispered, her eyes wide with panic. "I can't answer it. Jack, I can't." "Yes, you can," he said, his voice firm. He stepped forward, picked up the phone, and hit the speaker button. "Officer Riley's phone," he said. "This is Dr. Shapiro. Is she there?" "I'm here, doctor," Kate choked out, her hands pressed to her mouth. "Doctor, please." There was a pause. Kate felt the world tilt, ready to fall. "Officer," Dr. Shapiro's voice came over the speaker, and it was tired but not sad. It was warm. "I just wanted to let you know your partner is a medical miracle. He's a stubborn, tough-as-nails fighter." Kate's knees gave out. She grabbed the edge of the counter. He is? His vitals have been rock solid for 3 hours. The internal bleeding has stopped. His lung function is improving, the doctor said, and she could hear the smile in her voice. "He's not just stable anymore, Kate. He's pulling through. He's going to make it." The world snapped back into focus. The relief was not a gentle wave. It was a physical, violent force. A sound tore from Kate's throat, a combination of a sob and a scream. The phone slipped from Jack's hand and clattered to the counter. Kate didn't even notice. She turned and, in a blind rush of released terror and gratitude, she launched herself at Jack. She buried her face in his t-shirt, her arms wrapping around his solid frame, and she sobbed. Jack stood frozen for a half second, his entire body rigid, completely unused to this kind of contact. Then, slowly, as if his arms were remembering a long-forgotten language, he raised them. He didn't just pat her on the back. His arms encircled her, one hand moving to the back of her head, holding her securely as she wept. He said nothing. He just stood there, a solid, immovable object, protecting her as she finally broke. The relief that had flooded Kate's apartment when Dr. Shapiro gave her the good news had evaporated with the morning light. Now, 48 hours into her administrative leave, the reinforced locks on her doors and windows felt less like a defense and more like the bars of a cage. She was a police officer, and her entire life was built on action, on movement, on purpose. Now, her purpose was pacing the 3-room perimeter of her apartment. She had no badge, no gun, and her partner was in an ICU. She was isolated, and the silence was deafening, amplifying every creak of the building, every car that passed on the street. She had called the clinic twice. Zeus was improving. The vet said he was angry and sore, which was the best news she had ever heard. He was a warrior, just as Jack had said. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call, and her heart leapt, but it was just her captain, Dave Ramsey. "Riley," his voice was strained, "all business. I need you to come in. Now. Just come in." The squad room felt alien. She was in civilian clothes, her service weapon locked at home, her belt empty. She felt naked. The other cops, men and women she had joked with just days before, suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. They wouldn't meet her eyes. This was the blow from the Vance family. Not a direct attack, but the cold, creeping rot of isolation. She was already a pariah. She walked into Ramsey's office. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Sit down, Kate." He didn't offer her coffee. "I'm going to be straight with you," he said, staring at a file on his desk. This Vance thing, it's out of my hands. I'm getting pressure from downtown, from people I don't even know." He finally looked up, his eyes pained. "The department's launching a formal internal affairs investigation." Kate's blood ran cold. An investigation into what? Into me getting assaulted? Into them trying to kill my K9? "No," Ramsey said, and he looked ashamed. "They're investigating your escalation of a routine traffic stop. They're investigating the excessive force used by your unidentified accomplice who put 4 men in the hospital." Kate felt like she had been punched. Accomplice? He saved me. He saved Zeus. Those men were animals. And he disappeared. Ramsey slammed his hand on the desk, a rare show of his own fury. "He's a ghost, Kate. A ghost who broke one man's arm, caved in another's ribs, and nearly strangled a third. The Vance family's lawyer, Marcus Thorne, is filing a formal complaint against the department and you for orchestrating an illegal, violent attack on his client's security detail." Kate was speechless. The sheer, twisted audacity of it. They were flipping the entire narrative. They were painting her as the villain. "And Ethan," she finally whispered. "Ethan Vance has filed a harassment complaint against you." "Sir," Kate said, her voice shaking with a rage so cold it burned. "That is a lie. You know it's a lie." "It doesn't matter what I know," Ramsey roared, then lowered his voice. "Don't you get it? They're making you the problem. The department is going to hang you out to dry to make this go away." He sighed, the anger draining out of him, leaving only a weary administrator. "I'm not suspending you anymore, Kate. I'm ordering you to desk duty. Effective immediately. You'll be in the archives reviewing cold cases. No contact with the street, no access to active files, and you will not, under any circumstances, try to contact your witness again. Is that clear? It was clear. She was being buried. This was the real attack. Not with a crowbar, but with a pen, with policy. This was how the Vance family won. That night, Jack Corrigan sat in the driver's seat of a nondescript gray sedan parked across the street from Kate's apartment. He had traded his hotel for this car. He had seen her leave the precinct, her shoulders slumped, her entire posture radiating defeat. He had seen the way the other cops avoided her. He had seen this exact tactic in Afghanistan. Isolate the asset, cut them off from support, break their morale, make them an easy target. He knew with absolute certainty that the real attack was coming tonight. They had tested her with the lawyer. They had weakened her with the department. Now they would send the wolves. The sun set, and the Austin streetlights flickered on, casting their weak golden light. The street was quiet, wrapped in the humid embrace of the night. Jack was perfectly still. He was a creature of the dark, of the long, patient wait. He ate a flavorless protein bar and drank warm water, his eyes never leaving the front of her apartment building. At 2:17 a.m., it happened. A dark blue commercial van with a faded Acme Plumbing logo on the side rumbled down the street and parked badly, half on the curb. No plumber worked at 2:00 a.m. The van's license plates were caked in thick, fresh mud. Deliberate, the side door slid open, and two men emerged. These were not the suited professionals from the first night. These were blunt instruments. They were large, wearing dark hoodies and work pants, and they were both carrying long, heavy crowbars. They walked directly toward the walkway, toward Kate's ground floor unit. They never made it to the door. Jack was out of his car before the van's sliding door had thumped shut. He moved like smoke, his feet silent on the grass, using the shadow of a massive live oak to cover his approach. Kate's apartment building had an external wooden stairwell leading to the second floor units, creating a dark, three-sided alcove at its base. The men passed it, their focus on Kate's door. Jack emerged from that alcove directly behind them. "Wrong apartment," he said, his voice a low, calm vibration in the night. The first man, the smaller of the two, spun around, surprised. He raised the crowbar. He was too slow. Jack didn't attack the man, he attacked the weapon. He drove the heel of his palm into the man's wrist, breaking his grip. The crowbar clattered loudly on the concrete walkway. At the same moment, Jack's other hand, formed into a rigid blade, struck the man's throat. A single, precise, and silencing blow. The man collapsed, his hands clawing at his neck, making no sound but a wet, gagging gasp. The second man was bigger, faster. He roared and swung his own crowbar in a wide horizontal arc, a blow that would have decapitated Jack. But Jack was no longer there. He had ducked under the swing, inside the man's reach. As the man's momentum carried him forward, Jack rose up. He grabbed the man's wrist with one hand and his elbow with the other. He used the man's own forward momentum, spun, and slammed the man face first into the solid brick wall of the stairwell. The impact was a sickening, hollow thud, like a melon striking pavement. The man didn't make a sound. He just slid down the wall, a heap of unconscious muscle. Inside the apartment, a light snapped on. Kate was on her feet, her heart pounding. She had heard it, the clatter of the crowbar on the concrete. She crept to her door, her hand on the new deadbolt Jack had installed. She looked through the peephole. She saw nothing. The walkway was empty. The streetlight cast long, empty shadows. There was no one there. She was shaking, convinced she was now imagining threats, that the pressure was finally making her see ghosts. She backed away from the door, her own home now her enemy. Across the street, Jack Corrigan settled back into his driver's seat. He had dragged the two unconscious men from the walkway, dumped them unceremoniously in the back of their own van, and taken their keys. He would deal with that later. He watched her light go out. He watched her apartment go dark, and he resumed his watch. The archives were a tomb. Kate was buried in paper, her new desk a gray metal slab in the precinct's windowless basement. The air was dry, smelling of decomposing files and dust. Her new partner was a wheezing photocopier from the last century. This was Captain Ramsey's desk duty, a deliberate, soul-crushing isolation. For 2 days, she had reviewed cold cases, the ink blurring, her mind replaying the sound of the crowbar on the concrete, a sound she was now convinced she had imagined. She was the department pariah, the woman who had stirred the dragon and was now being offered as a sacrifice. Her anger had curdled into a cold, heavy resignation. They had won. The Vance family, with their lawyers and their invisible, choking influence, had successfully erased her. She was a ghost in her own department. That evening, as she walked to her car in the secure police lot, a shadow separated itself from the concrete pillar beside her car. Kate's hand flew to her hip, her fingers finding only the denim of her jeans. "They buried you." Jack Corrigan's voice was a low vibration in the twilight. He was just there. She hadn't heard him, hadn't sensed him, and it terrified her. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, looking around the lot. "You can't be here. They're investigating you. They're calling you my accomplice." "I am," he said, his face impassive in the deepening shadows. "This is what they do. I've seen it. They isolate the target, discredit them, make them invisible. Then they remove them." He took a step, not toward her, but to the side, scanning the roofline of the adjacent building. "The men I dealt with at your apartment weren't junkies. They were professionals, just sloppy. They were sent to frighten you. The next ones won't be." Kate leaned against her car, the wave of despair she had been fighting all day finally washing over her. "So what?" she whispered. "It's over. They won. I'm in the basement. Zeus is in recovery. And Ethan Vance is probably on a yacht somewhere. I have nothing." "You're wrong," Jack said. His voice was cold, sharp, and it cut through her self-pity. "You have an invitation." That made her look up. "What?" "You're a cop, Kate. You believe in the system, and that system just betrayed you. You can't win by their rules. So, we're going to play by ours." He finally looked at her, his eyes dark and intense. "We're not going to fight them. We're going to expose them. We are going to get them on tape." The plan was audacious, reckless, and brilliant. It was also, Kate knew, completely illegal. Jack's logic was that the lawyer, Marcus Thorne, had already offered a bribe. He wanted her to take it. "You're going to call him," Jack said. "Not as a cop, as a broken, terrified woman who wants her life back. You're going to take the money." "And then what?" Kate asked, her pulse hammering. "A wire," Jack said. "My wire, not the department's. Get Thorne and Ethan in the same room. Get them to admit to the bribe, to the attack, to the threats. Get them to say why. We get that, we burn their whole house down." An hour later, Kate sat on her living room floor, Jack standing in the corner by the window, a silent statue. Her hands were shaking, but this time she used it. She dialed the number on Marcus Thorne's business card. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice a perfect imitation of a person on the verge of collapse. This is Officer Riley. Kate Riley." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Officer, what a pleasant surprise. I do hope you've had time to reconsider our offer of clarification." I can't," Kate stammered, reading from the script Jack had laid out. "They put me in the archives. They're trying to fire me. This isn't, I just want it to be over. Please, I'll clarify. I'll do whatever you want." Thorne's voice was honey smooth. "I'm so glad to hear you've seen reason, Kate. These things are best handled quietly. A private matter." "The donation," Kate said. The money you offered, I need help." "Of course, my dear," Thorne said. "We are, above all, compassionate." The meet was set. Midnight, an old, disused warehouse on the river, part of the Vance's older property. Jack prepped her. He taped a high-fidelity digital recorder, no bigger than a credit card, to the small of her back. He handed her a tiny, flesh-colored earpiece. "One way," he said. "I can hear you. You can't hear me. Do not talk to me. If I need you to get out, I will override the feed with a triple-click static pulse. You hear that, you walk out, no matter what." He then handed her a small, subcompact 380 pistol. She looked at it. "Where did you get this?" "Don't ask," he said. "It's clean. It's your last resort. You're not going in to be a hero. You're an actress. Get the recording and get out. I'll be on Overwatch. I'll be your ghost." The warehouse loomed out of the darkness by the Colorado River. The humidity was gone, replaced by a cold, wet chill that smelled of rust, dead fish, and decay. The place was a skeleton of steel and corrugated tin. Kate parked where they told her, her headlights cutting a small cone of light into the abyss. She got out, her heart a cold drum against her ribs. She was alone. "Showtime," she whispered. She walked toward the single open bay door. The interior was massive, cavernous, and lit by only a few bare, dangling bulbs. In the center, she saw Marcus Thorne, the lawyer, his silver gray suit looking ridiculous in the filth. "Kate, my dear," he said, his arms open. "I'm so glad you came." But he wasn't alone. Kate stopped. Her blood turned to ice. Standing next to Thorne was Ethan Vance. And flanking Ethan were 6 men. These were not the street thugs. These were not the suited professionals. These men wore black cargo pants, plate carriers, and carried short-barreled rifles. They were quiet, their eyes cold and flat. They were operators, mercenaries. "What is this?" Kate said, her hand instinctively moving to her side. "This," Ethan said, stepping forward, his voice no longer slurred but sharp and hateful, "is pest control." He laughed, a high, ugly sound. "You really think I'm stupid enough to pay you after what you and your phantom friend did to my men?" He gestured to the mercenaries. "This is my new security detail. Cost my father a fortune. X Delta, I think." He smiled. "I came to pull this weed by the root." At that exact moment, from a perch on a loading crane half a mile away, Jack Corrigan watched the scene through the high-powered optics of a spotting scope. He saw the men. He saw their weapons, their posture, the way they scanned the rafters. He saw the small, almost invisible glint of a sniper scope on a rooftop across the river. He didn't speak. He just clicked the transmit button on his radio, sending 3 sharp, deafening bursts of static into Kate's earpiece. "Abort! Abort! Abort!" Kate flinched at the sound. She got the message. I forgot my bag in the car," she stammered, taking a step back. One of the mercenaries instantly moved, blocking the door. "No," Ethan said, his smile fading. "You're not going anywhere." In her ear, she heard Jack's voice for the first time, a grim, tense whisper that overrode the static. "Kate, it's a trap. They knew. They're on comms, and they're jamming the recorder. They have counter-overwatch. They were waiting for me, too." The world narrowed to the sound of Jack's voice in Kate's ear, a grim, tense whisper over the static. "It's a trap. They knew. They're on comms, and they're jamming the recorder. They have counter-overwatch. They were waiting for me, too." Ethan Vance's voice was a gleeful sneer in the vast, dark warehouse. "You look scared, officer. You should be. You and your ghost friend walked right into." He was cut off, not by a gunshot, but by a sound like a giant whip cracking, followed by an explosive pop from outside. The few bare bulbs hanging from the rafters didn't just flicker, they exploded in a shower of sparks, and the entire cavernous warehouse was plunged into a suffocating, absolute darkness. It was so total it felt like a physical weight. Jack's first shot from his position on the crane half a mile away had not been at a person. It had been at the main power transformer on the pole feeding the entire block. This was not a blackout. This was an amputation. For a single, stunned second, the warehouse was silent. Then the chaos began. What was that?" Ethan shrieked, his voice cracking. One of the mercenaries, a trained operator, shouted, "Flashlights! Get lights on! Now, find the door!" Instantly, 6 powerful white beams from their weapon-mounted lights sliced through the darkness. They were blind, sweeping the empty spaces, creating long, dancing, and perfect targets. In her ear, Kate heard Jack's voice, now deadly calm. "Counter-sniper first. Stay down. Stay in shadow. Do not move." Across the river in a derelict power station, the other sniper, the one waiting for Jack, adjusted his own night vision optics. He had seen the muzzle flash from the crane. He smiled, settling in for the kill. He never saw Jack's second shot. Jack, a master of his craft, had already moved 20 yards down the crane's gantry after his first shot. The counter-sniper was aiming at a ghost. Jack's rifle spoke once. A heavy thud echoed faintly across the water. The enemy sniper scope, and the man behind it, were neutralized. "Overwatch is blind," Jack whispered in Kate's ear. "Now we work in the dark." Kate was no longer a target. She was a cop. She had been buried in the archives, but she had spent those days reading cold cases, reading about survival. She didn't have night vision, but she had the 380 Jack had given her, and she had her training. She crouched behind a rusted iron support pillar, the metal cold against her cheek. The mercenaries were still shouting, moving in pairs, their beams cutting the darkness. "Stay still, Kate," Jack commanded. "Let them come right." A mercenary, his senses on fire, heard the faint whisper and spun, his light catching the pillar she was hiding behind. "There!" he yelled, but Jack's voice was already in her ear. "Move left now." Kate scrambled, rolling from one pillar to the next as a burst of automatic fire tore through the space she had just been. The bullets ricocheted, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. She was breathing. She was moving. She was fighting. Jack was now doing what he did best. He was using the chaos he had created. From his perch, he was an avenging angel, his high-powered scope seeing everything. He was not a killer. Not tonight. He was a surgeon. He saw two mercenaries take cover behind a stack of rotted pallets. "Hostiles 40 feet to your left," he murmured. "Stand by." A single shot from his rifle, and the steel girder above the men exploded. Not the men, the girder. A shower of rust, sparks, and a heavy, dislodged piece of ironwork crashed down onto their position. There were two sharp cries and then silence from that corner. Two more men were near the door, trying to get out. Jack's voice was a whisper in her ear. The two at the door, they're mine. Two more shots, so fast they sounded like one. Not at the men, at the ground just in front of their feet. The concrete exploded, sending high-velocity chips of stone into their shins. They screamed and dropped, their legs shredded by the spall. They were out of the fight. Now there was just Ethan, his one remaining bodyguard, and the lawyer, Thorne, who was whimpering somewhere in the dark. "Where is he?" Ethan screamed, firing his own small pistol blindly into the darkness. "Find him." The last mercenary grabbed Ethan, trying to drag him toward a small office in the back. "This way, boss." "Get." Jack's voice was in Kate's ear. "Last one, he's yours, Kate. Move up 10 yards. Kate moved. She was done hiding. She ran low and fast through the shadows. The mercenary saw her movement, raised his rifle, but he was blinded by his own flashlight. He was looking for a threat, he didn't see the one right in front of him. Kate didn't use the gun. She used her training. She slammed into him, her shoulder hitting his diaphragm, and drove him backward into a metal wall. She didn't stop. She brought her knee up hard and then delivered a perfectly executed CQC strike to his throat. He dropped the rifle, gagging. He was done. It was just Ethan. He stood paralyzed, his pistol useless in his trembling hand. The darkness, which had been his weapon, was now his prison. Kate stepped out of the shadows. He didn't even see her until she had the 380 pressed against his temple. He yelped and dropped the gun. "Please don't," he whimpered. It was a joke. Kate didn't shoot him. She hit him, a single, solid open palm strike that sent him reeling against a support beam. She grabbed his wrist, twisted it behind his back with painful, professional force, and snapped her own handcuffs on him. The click of the cuffs was the loudest sound in the warehouse. "Ethan Vance," she panted, her voice shaking but strong. "You are under arrest." Again. In her ear, Jack's voice was quiet. "It's done. I've made the call. Get away from the windows." "What?" Kate asked. "The cavalry is on its way," he said. "And I'm a ghost." The earpiece went dead with a final click of static. 5 minutes later, the first sirens wailed in the distance. 10 minutes later, the warehouse was bathed in a flashing hell of red and blue light. Captain Dave Ramsey was the first one through the door, his gun drawn, his face a mask of disbelief. He saw Kate, alive, dirty but standing. He saw Ethan Vance cuffed to a beam. He saw 6 mercenaries and a lawyer, all neutralized, groaning, but alive. He saw the sniper rifle across the river, which another team had already recovered. He holstered his weapon and just stared at Kate. "Riley," he said, his voice full of awe. "What in the name of, what did you do?" Kate just looked at him, her hands still shaking. "I was on desk duty, sir," she said, her voice raw. "I was reviewing a cold case." 1 week later, the sun was high over Zilker Park. The air was clear, and the humidity had finally broken. Kate, in jeans and a t-shirt, threw a bright blue ball. It was caught midair by a blur of sable-colored fur. Zeus, his ribs wrapped in a white medical harness but his tail wagging, bounded back to her, healthier and happier than he had been in weeks. He dropped the ball at her feet and barked. She was about to throw it again when a shadow fell over her. "He looks good," Jack Corrigan said. He was wearing the same plain clothes, but he had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "His recovery is impressive." "He's a warrior," Kate said, smiling. "Someone told me that." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, just watching the dog. "My leave is up," Jack said. "I'm shipping out." Kate's smile faded, but she nodded. She had known this was coming. "Where?" "I can't tell you that," he said. She nodded. "Will you be back?" He didn't answer. He just looked at her, his gaze holding hers. "You're not in the archives anymore. I heard Ramsey put you up for a commendation. And Charles Vance, he's a little too busy with a federal investigation to bother you." Kate couldn't help but smile. "Thank you, Jack." "Don't thank me," he said. He reached out, his fingers lightly brushing the new high-grade deadbolt on her apartment door that hadn't been there yesterday. He had installed it while she was at the park. "Just keep your locks secure." Kate looked at the lock, then back at him. "It'll hold," she said, her voice soft. He gave her a single, sharp nod. It was the closest he would ever come to a salute. Then he turned and walked away, melting into the crowd of tourists and students, disappearing just as he had in the alley. A ghost leaving a warrior behind to guard the city.